Hello and welcome to a live That Christian panel here on Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. We're glad to be back. We're glad to see some of you familiar faces in the chat. And we have a special guest tonight. Please welcome Kelly Lamb. Some of you will recognize Kelly. She's been on Deprogrammed before. She is a writer and former SJW. Very kind of similar background to me, former SJW, now a Christian. Who also, you're a musician. There's a lot of things that you do. And one of the most lovely people I know, and even though she's a Canadian and we're talking about US politics tonight, she assured me she's heard of Trump and Kamala. So she's going to be able to weigh in. Kelly, it's so nice to have you back.
Thank you for having me and for the very lovely intro. And yes, don't hold it against me that I'm from Canada. I was just born here, Not a Trudeau fan.
Well, I was saying before, you guys are kind of like a warning for us. Everything that's happening here has already happened there.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I don't even know where to start. We'd have to do a whole 3 hours on Canada and where we're at right now. It's not good, but hey, God's still in control. So
yes. I want you to meet our two other panelists, Michelle from Force of Light. Hello, Michelle.
Hello. It's good to be back. I always enjoy the Christian panels.
I do too. This is one of my favorite things to do is to hang out with you guys every other week. And then we've also got Brahma Bull in his new hairdo.
Yeah. My new very orange hair. Yep. Hopefully the internet actually works for me this week because that last show was a travesty. So haven't had any issues since. Got a new router.
It looks clear there. I just have to know, do you wear that hat to like the grocery store and does your wife mind?
I wear the other red hat to the grocery store. Okay. I wear this one when I'm driving with the top off of the Jeep. So the hair is just going wild. My kids absolutely hate it. They don't mind the original one. They do not like this one.
With the fake hair.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, it's good to be here, you guys, in the chat. Like I said, good to see you guys. We are covering, sometimes, as you know, we've done on that Christian panel, we do film reviews and book reviews and things that, we think we might enjoy talking about, reviewing together. But we also talk about current events and cultural issues. And so tonight, we're going to talk about this new phenomenon that's taken the internet by storm, and it's called Evangelicals for Kamala, or Christians for Kamala. It's actually, I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek joking there because there have been some claims that it's a bit astroturfed, meaning not entirely an organic movement. People,
you think?
I don't know. We're going to look at some of it and, just share our thoughts about it, have a discussion about it. Like, what is this? Who are these evangelicals for Kamala? And then we'll compare the way the press has sort of reacted to evangelicals in general, evangelicals for Trump, and then evangelicals for Harris. Like, is there any difference there? So why don't we start with this clip? There's a couple of groups. There's evangelicals for Kamala, and there's also Christians for Kamala. And so this is a video clip. Woke Preacher Clips, who we love, clip this. And he says, checking in on Christians for Kamala, Paula Stone Williams, former president of the Orchard Group Church Planting Network, says we must support for Vice President Harris in order to keep trans in kids. Well, let's watch it and see actually what Paula says. Paula, by the way, used to be Paul.
Oh, okay.
That explains the voice. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. And when he came out as trans, they asked him to step down. This was several years ago. And I learned about this from someone who used to attend one of the churches that they planted, that the Orchard Group planted. Okay.
So last year, 592 anti-transgender laws were introduced in state legislatures throughout the United States. 90 of them were signed into law in over 20 different states. Who was driving those laws? Well, of course, it was Republican legislatures, but people assume it was Republicans. Well, 2 studies show us it was not Republicans per se driving those laws, because 61% of Republicans believe transgender people should have the same civil rights as everybody else. So who was driving those laws? Who is still driving those laws? Oh, it is the people I grew up with. It is the people who taught me about Jesus. It is the people to whom I preached. It is evangelical Christians, 87% of whom believe that gender is immutably determined at birth. 67% of whom believe we already give too many civil rights to transgender people. I don't worry about myself. I mean, whatever happens, I'll be fine. I'm older than dirt, and I will not live long enough to lose my white male entitlement. That's the truth. I serve as mayor pro tem here in Lyons, Colorado. I have no difficulties here. I'm not concerned about me. All my friends, it's the kids. It's the kids. Do you know transgender children have a suicide completion rate 13 times higher than their peers? So just yesterday, I got a call from grandparents in New England asking if I would talk to their daughter in Tennessee about her child who needs medical care and cannot receive it in Tennessee. My coworker, a licensed counselor, just today saw 2 transgender children who came here because of the medical care that's available to them here in Colorado that's not available where they came from. I'm frightened for the children that now I have hope. I hope you will give, and I hope you will give again and again and again. And I hope you will take every opportunity you have, and you will remember the children, all those kids who have every right to live an authentic life, because the call toward authenticity is sacred and holy and for the greater good. And I, for one, want a president and a vice president who believe the same. Thank you. So
Okay.
Yeah, we probably should have just paused that about every 10 seconds and said
We
something,
really
'cause
should have. There was a lot to digest there.
repeating the lies about the 592 or 597, legislative acts. No, they're not all targeted at trans. They're mostly targeted at let's not do anything to our kids.
Yes. So, well, let's start there. Most of the time when I've heard that claim, people just copy paste it or they just repeat it because they've heard that number, and they don't look into these things. Most of the time when I've heard it, it's been, they say 527. And I know where they get that number. That's from the ACLU here. But the thing is, you can go through this ACLU map and you can click on it and you can look at each bill, and almost every single one of these bills is against mutilating and sterilizing kids. Like you said, it's about kids, vulnerable. It's about kids, or it's about making sure that there are no sexually inappropriate performances for children.
Drag shows.
Drag shows for kids or stripping for kids. A lot of them are very broad with the language. They're not just saying drag, they're saying sexually inappropriate shows.
Right.
And
which we're fine with, because it doesn't just have to be drag. Just like kids shouldn't be in strip clubs, they shouldn't be near drag shows.
Or at burlesque shows, yes.
Yeah.
And so almost all of those bills, they just put it under this false blanket term of anti-trans. But these are bills to protect children. That's what they are. And so the funny thing about this guy, and I, by the way, just my choice, but I don't respect him, so I'm not going to do the chosen pronoun thing. But the thing about him is that he doesn't hide that. At the second half of the video, he gets to the point, which is that he fully, vocally thinks that children should be able to, that they're able to consent to sterilization, to cutting off their genitals, to these mutilating surgeries, that they're able to consent to that, and that is medical care. Does anybody else have something? Because I'm a little speechless about that.
I'm trying to think of how to word this, because this definitely isn't all. This isn't all. So I want to give that and not make it just a blanket statement. But so many, that guy's not rational. So you're wanting him to rationalize something that he can't because he's not a rational human. Like, I think all they hear is it's against trans. Like, they can't rationalize the fact. And again, some can. I mean, we've got gays for groomers, things like that.
Against
But a lot,
groomers.
yes. So, what did I say? I'm sorry.
Gays for groomers.
Oh, yeah, gays against groomers. And like they can distinguish it, but some of them like can't hear that. All they hear is no trans, and that's actually not what the bill is. The bill actually just is like, you can make this decision if you desire after you're a consenting age of adult, which is 18.
Right.
Well, and the thing is, some of these things are also what they tried to label in Florida as the Don't Say Gay bill, that kind of thing, where it's
Yes.
literally about porn in your kids' elementary schools. And it's so weird to me that all of you see it constantly. A whole bunch of the trans people are like, well, that's targeting us. It's like, so telling you can't give little kids porn or groom them is targeting you, because that's kind of a weird admission.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, and I've said this before, but it's very bigoted against gay people and trans people to say that they're somehow affected by laws that say, hey, you can't groom kids, you can't perform sexually in front of kids, and you can't mutilate and sterilize kids. How does that affect gay and trans people? It doesn't. It's pretty bigoted to assume it does. That they need to do this.
Well, it's either that or they're using the whole alphabet mafia thing and adding the P is in the plus.
Right.
And claiming it.
Yeah, the headlines are very effective, sadly, on stuff like this, where everything just gets labeled anti-trans, and it doesn't matter what the substance is. It doesn't matter whether a person actually has care or compassion for the, quite frankly, in my humble opinion, monstrous physical acts that are being done in the name of healthcare. I mean, without giving too much TMI off the bat, I've had women's health issues for years, and I've had to have surgeries that are very devastating, and I just can't fathom any of this happening to anybody who is young enough to, they don't know what they're doing, first of all. And second, if it's not medically 100% necessary and it's mostly based on subjective criteria, I don't know how we can ethically call it medical care in the first place. But as soon as you start to have that discussion where you actually do care about the child, and I do believe some of these people care about children, but they're just not looking past the headlines of anti-trans. And if that's all you get stuck on, then I guess, how do you even argue with that, right?
Yeah, and that's where I say, like, they can't rationalize that, they can't distinguish the difference.
Well, and they've also bought into the next portion of that video, the lie about what how the suicide rate is affected by not letting kids do things. It's like, no, it's about the same rate post-surgery as it is before it. So you're not helping them. You're just screwing them up even more.
Yeah,
you're making it to where they can't recover back.
I'm sorry, I was cutting you off. I was just going to say the suicide rate, that's been debunked. You can look at studies.
Yeah.
It's not affected by whether a child undergoes this treatment, this sterilization and mutilation. In some studies have shown it might arguably be worse. We don't actually know the full impacts yet because this is all experimental, what we're doing to children. I have a question, like from a Christian perspective on this issue. There have been a lot of people who do these hot takes on Twitter where they say stuff like, a lot of leftists, for example, will say, you can't be a Christian and support Donald Trump. He's an immoral man. And now I think and I've got some tweets pulled up we can look at. We're starting to see the opposite, where we've got people responding to this Evangelicals for Kamala thing that's happening, and people saying you can't be a Christian and support the Kamala ticket. What do you guys think about these very blanket statements like that in either direction?
I know Christians voting both ways. I definitely have my thoughts on which side, because let's be real, in America we've got two sides that you're voting for. It's A or B. I definitely, for me personally, view one side is right now a little less demonic, if we want to word it that way, a little less evil. But that doesn't mean that good people don't just view things a little different way and can still vote the other way, because they definitely do.
Kelly, you want to hit that? Or
Yeah, briefly. I mean, it's always a slippery slope, sort of sketchy place to assume someone's salvation. A lot of these are very morally black and white. And in my humble opinion, much like you said, it comes down to how biblically aware you are, how much you've actually read into the scripture, how much you understand the character of God. And there's some very specific policies that are pretty obviously, again, demonic, as you've already mentioned. But it's worrisome to me to automatically assume that someone doesn't know Christ and doesn't follow Christ, because I do know, as someone who came out of all of this years ago, that it's easy to be deluded and to be brainwashed and to think you're doing the right thing or the Christian thing. And if you have a view of Christ as this sort of hippie, love is love, no standards, just go with the flow cultural icon, then yeah, you're gonna probably go to the other side of things. And I don't want to say they're not Christians. I feel like that's not for me to say. You know, that's between someone and Christ, and Christ knows their heart. But yeah, I'm the same, where I would argue that right now the left-leaning parties, both in my country and in yours and elsewhere in the Western world, are doing some pretty horrible things that I think are pretty obviously anti-biblical. Mm-hmm. But the way they're framing it, I can see where they're coming from. I don't agree, but it's justified in their mind as loving or Christ-like
or merciful.
Right. Precisely.
Yeah.
And I think there's a difference between the way those two things work, Keri. I think most people on the right look at it and say, how can you support those policies? Whereas most people on the left are saying, how can you support that man?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
It's not a question of the policies on the right.
Yes.
It's how can you support Trump? Sure, they hate the policies too, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But Christians on each side are looking at it in two completely different ways. I say, how can you support the policies that she stands for and what she would actually institute in this country? Mm-hmm. Whereas they are literally looking at it as it's Trump.
That's right.
That's a great point. And because a lot of people talk about the morality of the man or the woman, like the person, which if you're trying to compare Kamala and Trump, I mean, they're
both bad,
sketchy, immoral, sexually immoral past. Like, okay, I'm not actually voting though for, someone to be my pastor or my husband or friend. Like, that's not what the vote is for, their personal character. Although it is a factor that I weigh when I look at people. Obviously it's one factor, but the more important thing is their policies. Like, what will they do? Like you're saying. And I'm kind of baffled by it, because I have a Christian friend who reached out to me recently who, in good faith, but really misunderstood some of my positions. And she was doing the human thing. He's so immoral. How could you support him? And I was like, but look at the great evil done by the left, like transing and mutilating kids, experimenting on kids. I mean, that issue alone is like, I don't care that he's a narcissist. Yes, I think he probably is, but he's not pushing those policies. And I have two options. I mean, I know there's more, but I have two realistic options. So I'm going to pick the one that I think is going to do less evil in the world. Does that make sense?
That's exactly the case.
Yeah. I think that's how we should vote.
Right. Well, let me ask you this then. Here's an example tweet. Now, this one doesn't say you can't be a Christian and vote for Kamala. So what do you think about this language? Melissa, the homemaking cheapskate. What a great name. Biblical Beauty is her handle on X. She says voting for the Marxist-inspired, child-mutilating, baby-murdering, truth-denying, God-hating policies of Kamala Harris is not an option for any faithful Christian.
I mean, I personally would probably use the same language, even though in all reality, if you break it down, she's technically, I mean, you know, I detect no lie in what she's saying. I personally wouldn't tweet that out because again, I think it's just worded at the most extreme level it can be worded. But at the same time, it's not necessarily wrong. I mean, it's like we were already talking about child mutilation, and so that's kind of where I'm saying I personally wouldn't word it that way, but and that's just me addressing the way she worded it.
Yeah.
I again, I understand how genuine Christians can vote for Democrats I've listened to their arguments. I don't agree with it. But
I think they're misguided.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Along those same lines, we've got this video from Matt Walsh. Let's listen to him. So here's a quote from it. He says, "Every American who considers himself conservative or Christian has a moral obligation to vote against Kamala." Here we go.
It's very simple. Every American who considers himself conservative or Christian has a moral obligation to vote against Kamala Harris. This is a bad person, and she is part of a regime, more importantly, that has very bad, very evil designs for this country. She wants to kill babies. Okay, up to the moment of birth. That's what these people believe in. Fully born infants. She wants to destroy our national sovereignty. She doesn't believe that we have a right to national sovereignty. She wants to indoctrinate our children into an ideology of self-harm and confusion. These are the people who want to release violent criminals onto the streets. You know, to continue to destroy our communities. And in every other sense, they are actively working against everything we claim to stand for. So whatever you think of Trump, I mean, even if you have the most unflattering view of him that a reasonable person could possibly have, he is not part of that agenda. And if you are voting for that agenda, you are actively participating in the evil. You are supporting it. You are helping it to gain and retain power. And that you're doing all of that to get back at Donald Trump because you don't like him at the expense of our country, that just makes you a fool at best. At best. This is not about being loyal to Donald Trump or any other politician. Politicians don't deserve our loyalty. I don't care about that. This is about loving your country enough and caring enough about your children and their future to put your feelings about Donald Trump to the side and cast a vote against this regime that has already done incredible harm to this country. And will do a lot more if we don't stop it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
You know what is more sympathetic to the poor and to, showing more empathy is not having 20% inflation. I mean, it's not just the abortion. It's not just the other stuff. I mean, the mutilating of kids. It's every facet. I mean, Trump's not going to war. He didn't do it. I mean, we've got war hawks in there now, and she will try to do something because so this is where the one real big attack on her, I think, would work. Not going with policy, but going after her actual thoughts. She's the one who wants to get rid of the filibuster so that they can do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. That's why she is evil. I mean, that is partially policy, but that is something she will do. They have said it. She's the one that broke the tie that has basically created this inflation. in both of the budgeting bills, or not budgeting bills, but the Inflation Reduction Act, and what was the other one? It was a 50-50 tie in the Senate. She is the one who made the decision that we needed more inflation.
She wants to get rid of the filibuster.
Yes, she is very, very for getting rid of the filibuster, which would lead to packed courts and everything else that they've been dreaming about for the past 4 years.
I mean, it's like getting rid of the balance of powers. Like they just want absolute power, like totalitarianism.
And that's the thing. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and the Democrat Party is very much into keeping their power.
Mm-hmm.
I've got another maybe controversial tweet to show you. This is from Josh Dawes. Do you guys follow him? Do you know him?
No, I've never heard
Nope.
of him.
Josh says he's got a podcast. He might join us on one of these shows at some point. He says the left doesn't just get a few issues wrong; their entire worldview is unbiblical. Is this a statement that you would agree with? And if so, like how would you explain that to maybe a Christian who is asking you what you mean by that, or to provide evidence for that?
Mm-hmm. I think it's an exaggeration, but it's probably pretty close to true. I mean, it isn't just a few issues with them. I mean, they want to replace God in your life. I mean, that's kind of their whole purpose, is the government takes the place of everything that is important. It gets rid of the nuclear family. It gets rid of everything that isn't the government. And that is what they believe. I mean, it didn't used to be.
Right.
But recently, they are moving down the road to either socialism or communism, and that is the end game of both of those ideals. And while the voting Democratic base may not really see that, I mean, you can see where the leadership on the left is trying to take the country.
Yeah, and I think we've been heading down the road of socialism for a long time. I think we're now kind of beyond socialism and heading down the road of communism quickly, if you heed all the things that they want.
And one of the first moves of communism is get rid of the church.
Well, and speaking as a Canadian, sorry to interrupt, but going more secular and going more down the road of socialism, which of course we are further down the lane than you guys have been. I mean, for now, I want that to stay the same, but for now, it's not a good road for Christians. It doesn't bode well for Christians. It doesn't lead to more Christianity. It doesn't lead to anything but more racial tension and more mockery of the church and more authoritarian control and decentralized government. And it's a very negative long-term forecast for Christians. I mean, we could get into this from a million different facets, but I would agree with that tweet in general. Yeah, maybe a bit extreme, but when you break down each and every policy, whether it's looking at abortion, whether it's looking at the way they see, sort of the lens in which they see the world, the glasses which they choose to view us, it's the social justice Bible. It's not the Bible. And they are not the same. They're not the same. And that's one thing I'm really noticing all over the West, but in Canada especially, just that progressive Christianity, as it might be called. I'm sure there's plenty of other terms.
Yeah.
It's not helping anybody. It's not serving the church. It's not bringing people to Christ. It's not a net positive, and it's not bringing people to the foot of the Lord. So
their entire worldview, and this is something you would know about also because you were in that woke world like I was in. When he says their worldview is unbiblical, I think he's saying kind of like what you're saying, is that it is a different worldview.
mm-hmm.
It's not a Christian worldview. Their worldview is that it's a form of it's this identity Marxism, woke Marxism, which leads to communism. But they believe the best way to look at the world, the story that they tell and that they want to teach kids, and that they are teaching kids in schools, is the best way to look at the world is as this struggle for power between identity groups, and all identity groups can be divided into the oppressed and the oppressor, and we have to redistribute power. And it's this whole Marxist religion. And that's the lens through which they interpret everything.
Yes.
To drive this point home, here's the Evangelicals for Harris X account. Have you guys interacted with this account at all?
No.
Okay. It's popping off. It's popular. I'm kidding. I don't feel like it's very popular. That's why I'm kind of like, is this astroturf? Like, who are these people? I don't even know. Evangelicals for Harris. This is them announcing a speaker. They did a whole panel. So, and this is something endorsed by and co-signed by Kamala Harris. This speaker, for example, is endorsed on this call, being the person who's leading the call. So they say, good morning. We're excited to announce Sandra Van Opstal to our speaker panel. She is a second generation Latina preacher and activist. Ugh. That word always worries me right away, because that tells me that's a word they like.
Well, like if you're a preacher of the gospel, you should be, scripture says, an ambassador for Christ, not exactly an activist for either the right or the left necessarily.
An activist, yes. An activist, reimagining the intersection. There's one of the woke cult words, intersection of faith and justice. There's the justice word. She's the executive director of Chasing Justice. Gosh, justice. She's a contributor to the New York Times bestselling book, A Rhythm of Prayer, and she's also the author of The Next Worship. And so this is her. They were announcing, she's going to be leading this call. And just look at this. This guy, I don't know this guy, Live Life says she's a nut job. Her religion is Marxism. Look at these tweets of hers. Decolonizing scripture alongside siblings from the majority world is a joy. Decolonizing scripture. That's woke cult speak. Deconstructing white Jesus and white church is not for me. You all created it. You all can podcast about it until all awards are won. Hashtag decolonize Jesus. Okay. Yeah. She also says, I have very little interest in spending time and energy to resuscitate the corpses within white evangelicalism. I do, however, believe there's a remnant of people worth engaging. Whatever needs to die, let it die. We need death and resurrection. We need reckoning revival.
I'd say the spirit of racism lives very strongly.
Yeah, that's divisive stuff. Whew.
So this is who's leading their Evangelicals for Kamala call. And to my mind,
kind of says it all.
That says it all. Yes. Yeah. Everything she's speaking it's not biblical. It's not Christian. She's speaking the woke religion.
Yeah. There's a spirit of resentment or something behind that that's pretty fierce. And I don't see that. Again, is that going to bring people to the foot of Christ? Is that going to have people saved? Is that going to have people know the one and true living God and the character of God? I get where some of these often women, some men, but often women are coming from. Like I from being in that past of the New Age and the sort of SJW world, you just want to care and you just want to love and you just want to make right all the wrongs that have ever been done. And Jesus does call us to battle against oppression and help the oppressed, yes. But it's like it's been taken into just such a wackadoo world of just constant SJW, the verbiage, just the same words regurgitated over and over. And it's not actually getting anybody anywhere. And it's not bringing anyone to Christ.
Well, and here's the kicker. They like to help the oppressed by oppressing a different people group.
Right.
In this case, the white male. Like they've got to now be oppressed. So it shows you where their heart is, because their heart is wicked, just as wicked as anyone who would be oppressing them. Like they're the same. Like it's just, and I actually watched a video. It was before COVID, and of course, I think it's no secret that the West, particularly Europe, has had a decline of faith for many years. Oh, there goes Keri's light.
Sorry, it does that once in a while. Keep going.
It was just so refreshing because I believe it was either Latinos or Africans. And I want to say it was Africans though. And they were saying, like, we want to go be missionaries in Europe. And they said the reason why is they said, we recognize they brought the gospel here to us, and now they need us to take it to them.
Wow.
And my point is that's the spirit of Christ, not we've got to decolonize the scriptures. And
right.
That's the opposite.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Michelle, what's that verse about? You're talking about how they are racist, which I believe they are. The woke religion, my old religion, is racist. What are those? What's the scripture about partiality?
Oh, that's what I brought that up recently. There are so many scriptures. I mean, I could sit here and I can actually begin to Google some, but I actually recently said next time I read through as I'm reading through the New Testament, I need to count as many times as it says, do not have partiality, because it is said multiple times throughout the New Testament of not judging people based off, their income, their race, their gender, any of those things, but we are to show no partiality because God shows no partiality.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I just pulled up a list.
There's quite a few of them.
Oh, I didn't even realize. I was thinking there was one. Yeah.
No, there's a lot. It is a common thread throughout the New Testament of not showing partiality.
Romans 2:11, for God shows no partiality. James 2:1, my brothers, show no partiality as you hold the faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory. And there's a whole list of these, as you said. That's the issue, is that a lot of the people who are in this religion, this woke religion, who have accepted the premises that it sells, and one of those premises is that in order to end racism, we have to be racist for a little while. Or in order to end sexism, we have to be sexist for a little while. They don't realize, I think, a lot of times that that's what they're being called to do in this religion. That's what they're being asked to do, because this woke religion has redefined racism and sexism conveniently, so that they can do this like kind of mental gymnastics and say, well, racism has been redefined to be prejudice plus power, so it can't be. This isn't racist what they're asking me to do.
Yes. And
Right.
I think a good thing too for people to ask themselves, like kind of distinguish what is God is what is not, is if your ideology is stirring up a hatred, it's not from the Spirit of the Lord.
Mm.
Unless
Because
it's a
John
hatred
tells-
towards you.
Yeah, because I mean the Bible says that God is above all things is love. So anything that is stirring up that hatred, and even in theology, I've expressed how I dislike actual feminist theology because it's very much just like the stuff in the secular world. And it really does begin to stir up a hatred of men as like an oppressive force. And that's what I'm saying. That's where you lose the plot. Like when you're stirring up hatred, there's also that in what's it called? I forget the actual name for it, but it's basically more African American. It's like the same thing for Black people as feminist theology.
Oh, liberation
Theology.
Oh,
And it's like you can agree with them to a point, but then it goes too far because it enters into this level of hatred.
Well, and all of that, the feminist theology, the liberation
Yes.
theology, critical race theory, all of it has roots in Marxism. And that's where it came from. Which the more I'm learning, the more I'm starting to realize Marxism, as Jane Lindsay says, is not just an economic policy. It is a religion. It is a faith. It's not just that it operates like a faith. That's how I was describing it for the past few years. It doesn't just operate like a faith. It is a faith.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. That's what the left wants, is to replace your family, your God, with the government. I mean, that's essentially what it gets down to. It becomes your faith.
Well,
And
and let's flesh out even more. Become your God, become your provider,
Yeah.
become your healer through.
You have to depend
through,
upon them for everything.
Yes, you go to them for everything you possibly need, and at that point you're in bondage to the government because they own you. Where it's the opposite with God. He's not oppressive, but humanity will be when given that opportunity.
Yeah.
In fact, I was just reading today. I'd have to go back and see. I'm reading through the Old Testament, and I'm in 1 Samuel, and it's when the people of Israel begin to. They ask Samuel for a king. They're like, "We see all these other nations; they have a king. Give us a king." And the Lord tells the prophet Samuel, "You go tell them. Basically, I'll give you a king.
I got a king for you.
Yeah, I'll give you a king, but that king's going to take a portion of your land. He's going to take a portion. He goes through this full list, which basically describes like he says, because you weren't happy with me being your king, with me being your God, and because of Israel rejecting just God being their ruler, and which was allowing them freedom. They wanted to have a ruler over them, a man-made ruler over them, and of course it's Saul, who will be somewhat oppressive to them and take from them.
This is all, as you're saying, about getting people to accept a different God, like a government or whatever, like a stand, an ideology that's not God, to replace God.
Well, it's humanism.
It's humanism.
Yeah.
But why do you think they're going in? This is a question somebody asked me on my Facebook, and I had an answer for it, but I'm curious what you guys think. Somebody was like, why are they doing this instead of just doing what they usually do, which is attacking evangelicals and attacking Christians? Why are they creating groups that Christians for Kamala? Christians, why are they claiming Christianity?
Well, if I may, you still have a pretty strong Christian sense down there. I mean, I feel like this is just, if they can't get everybody in by just calling out Christians. Some Christians are still going to find that, distasteful. But if you can shift how they view the Bible, if you can shift how they view the gospel, if you can shift how they view Jesus, and if you can make them feel guilty and make them feel whatever all the feelings are that are so important to keep leftist ideology going, then you can grasp that many more voters. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about getting votes and it's all about shifting the culture. So this just, I feel like, grabs onto a group of people that might still get their back up if you just attack Christianity altogether and say, well, that's my religion, that's my faith. But this way they make you say, yeah, but you're not really worshiping in a very compassionate way now, are you? Is that God you serve really like that? And it's a shift in, it also really targets, if I can add, it really targets people who have been hurt by the church, people who have some kind of chip on their shoulder about the church. I know people like this in my own personal life, and the progressivism got fantastically worse after there was an injury from a person in the church, because we are all sinful. We are not God. People make mistakes, right? And so I feel like this just really speaks to a group of people who are just ripe for deconstructing and, looking for a way to feel good about themselves and try to do the right thing. And again, if you're not biblically literate, or if you're in a weak spot or you're in a vulnerable spot, it'll grasp them. It'll pull them right in.
Do you know, Kelly, you just used like a great word, because that's something I noticed, like, say, going through seminary, where I definitely had teachers that were very vocally on the left. I had, others that were conservatives. The conservatives were always more quiet, though, because they were just going about their job and not promoting their political ideology in a theology class. But again, I think because it's such a part of the left, they just, like you said, it's their own religion. They talk. But I think you hit on a word that I've noticed. The ones that are more on the left and really make it a part of their theology and spirituality, they're the ones, like you said, they're unhappy and they're constantly deconstructing faith. And I'm fine with this. As a theologian, you're going to deconstruct scripture,
right?
But theology is also constructive. Like, you're going to build it back. Like, you're going to have a set of what you believe and what you believe the Bible says. And most of those people, I find, again, even theologically, all they like doing is deconstruct. And that leads you on a path that, I mean, ultimately can leave you kind of faithless.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well,
we've seen that with a lot of people. So
yeah.
And deconstruct, I think, is the perfect word for it, in both the way you guys are looking at it and the way I was looking at it was a little bit different on what they're trying to do and why. I mean, they've already created divisiveness in every possible group that they can. They've created divisiveness between the sexes, between races, between different religions. Why not delve deeper and divide the religions themselves within the religions? It's more of the intersectionality crap to get everything to collapse.
Right.
It's a lot easier than attacking if you can go in and just cause rifts everywhere. It just weakens it from the base rather than having to actually attack the wall.
It's analogous to Yuri Bezmenov, who's talking about, coming in and attacking through the institutions rather than having to launch a war.
Exactly. If you can wear down the institutions, it'll collapse from within.
Yes. let me show you guys something. I wanted to make sure I had the right ones pulled up. I think this is the one I was looking at. Just to compare the media and how they're reacting to this. If you're not aware, the media typically, when they talk about evangelicals, it's with this sort of sneering condescension and scorn, disdain. And I was curious if they had changed their language when they talk about evangelicals for Kamala. So let's compare the NPR. Let's look at two NPR pieces. This is one about Trump, and this was from April of this year. Quote, the headline is, "If you can keep it, Donald Trump, white evangelicals, and the 2024 election." Also, whenever they talk about Trump, they never, ever, ever just talk about evangelicals for Trump. They always put the descriptor white. They always include white because they're trying to make it a racial thing, to view everything through that lens. So in this piece, here's how it starts. With his several divorces, violent rhetoric, and a long list of criminal charges, former President Donald Trump may not be your idea of a God-fearing Christian, but that hasn't stopped him from appealing to his Christian base. Okay, that's just to start. It's just out the gate attacking him, his own morality, attacking him as a person, and painting him in a negative light.
Yeah.
Well, and attacking the fact that he actually is trying to appeal to a group. It's a lot better than Obama telling Christians to get off their high horses. That was really appealing to the Christian base.
That's true. Okay, wait. So here's a new one. This is about Kamala. This is from August 12th. NPR headline: A pro-Kamala group shows that not all Christian voters are conservative white evangelicals. They put the white. They put the white in there. Okay. And then it starts off: a group of supporters of Vice President Kamala Harris hopes to rally Christian voters around her campaign and bring together moderate and progressive Christians. There's nothing in there about her sexual dalliance. Like, they were attacking him and his background.
Former prostitute, Vice President Kamala Harris.
Right. There's nothing in there about all the stuff she's allegedly done in the past. Like, none of that personal history for her.
And they do that. Like, I've witnessed that. Like, they will shame you. Like, how dare you vote for this man? Meanwhile, they could vote for the literal devil and it's acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a few double standards in there once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So they go on, and we don't have to read this whole piece. Just the way they open it, you can tell it's different. But if you go through it, again, they try and make it all about race. Whenever they talk about Trump and the Christians who support Trump, they always use the descriptor white.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And whenever they are talking about the evangelicals for Kamala, they're talking about Black people. They're talking about how it's diverse, and it's Christianity through a different religious lens, through a identity Marxism lens.
Go to the first line of this one real quick. I think Texas Sheep Lady caught something that none of us caught, even though I read it.
The one that I just
yeah, the one you just had up.
Okay, let me put it back.
Not the headline, but the first sentence. Did it say former Vice President Kamala Harris? It has nothing to do with the discussion. It's just, that would be interesting if that's what they actually wrote there.
A group of supporters of Vice President Kamala Harris.
No, I thought when it was the paragraph that was introducing the whole story.
No, that's it. It doesn't say former.
I thought it said former. Okay.
No. At least I don't see that, unless it was somewhere else where I was scrolling. No, but that would have been funny. A funny typo.
That would be.
Well, speaking of, let me just thank a few people quickly, if you don't mind. KB is here. Hey, KB, good to see you again. Gifted 5 Deprogrammed memberships tonight. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. You guys, if you got one of those memberships, tell KB thank you for his generosity and for being in the chat. Eric, hey, Eric, Heffelfinger for $20 says, Trump is failing on talking about this. He needs to start citing how European countries are not doing this to kids now. He's just focusing on the US and labeling them extremists, which they are. That's too easy to call just an opinion of his.
Yeah. Since the left is so likely to go along with the science of the globalists, I mean, basically, if the European Union is going with the WHO and that kind of stuff as their guide for everything, then yeah, that's a little bit more useful than just saying it's bad.
I absolutely agree.
A lot of countries too that, if I recall correctly, people that are more left-leaning in the States argue that you need to change your healthcare system to be more like these countries. And then a lot of these countries are starting to question what they're doing with trans kids. And so I'm not sure why there's a disconnect there. So they understand healthcare fully and completely, except for this one thing. They're totally wrong and against trans on that, of course. So.
Right.
And just to be clear, I don't know if the WHO actually changed its stance or if it's just coming individually from different countries.
I think it's individual so far. I feel like
Probably.
the WHO is going to have to be pulled in kicking and screaming. So,
Yeah. It is. It's progressive countries. And I think Eric, you're right. He needs to hammer that home. I mean, and that would irk them to put that in a speech. I put that in my speech before the Austin City Council. I was like, we're going to ban this here. And we're going to follow in the footsteps of progressive countries that have banned it for kids and then name them all. Like they can't, that's like throwing holy
circuit.
water on them. Yeah. They can't stand it. We want to be like the progressive countries on this issue.
And something worth noting on that issue too, Keri, your friend Sarah was trying to explain it to me. I feel like I was a little slow on it, but I guess Governor Waltz, or could possibly be Vice President Waltz, or however you say his name. His bill on the trans issue is more intense than Newsom's.
Yeah, you can actually just separate the parents from the kid altogether if the kid decides and you disagree. So the state just takes control.
Talk about
okay, so that's the difference then, Brahma.
Yeah, I believe so. I think Newsom just has it to where the school doesn't have to tell the parent that the kid is identifying or making any changes.
That's right.
right.
A little bit different than taking the kids away completely, but it's hiding everything from the parents. That's why Musk was so pissed off about it, because Elon Musk went through this exact situation. He was told by his son's doctor, there's gender dysphoria, and if you want your son to live, you've got to do this. And he bought into the suicide rate thing. And that's where the transition came from with his son.
I'm just confirming this. Yes, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate, signed legislation that allows Minnesota courts to take temporary emergency jurisdiction in a child custody case that involves gender affirming care.
Yeah. And I guess that, again, that was like a step further than even Gavin Newsom would go.
Well,
Yeah.
you have two of the most progressive people in politics on this ticket, and they're trying to completely redo their history to show them as moderates. And people are buying it.
Something I'd like to say is, like, I get it. There's a lot of gross people that run as Republicans. There's a lot of very immoral people who run as Republicans. I 100% get that. I see that. I don't look to them as we've said, I don't look to them as a pastor. And I would say there's even some who maybe disdain it a little bit. They just know they have to go with it. But there's like genuine disdain by a lot of politicians on the left for and here's how I can say they have disdain for Christians, because they disdain what we believe in.
Yes.
How can I say they disdain what we believe in? Because they literally try to pass laws and practices that go against us and then call us phobes if we don't agree.
Yeah. It's absolute. It's more than disdain. It's like disdain. It's contempt. It's all of it. It's like they hate us. I have definitely felt that. Oh, Kelly, if you're still watching on your laptop, I'm sure you know, but we lost you.
Yeah, you come back.
Hey, did you know you're gone?
Did you know you're gone? Yeah, you probably knew before us. Anyway, jump back in when you can, even if it's on your laptop. That's cool. I'll just.
Someone said Canada got Kelly.
No. Your average patriot nerd. Also a Deprogrammed membership fairy tonight. Gifted 1 membership. Thank you so much, your average patriot nerd. And Skillet for $20 says, Kamala is a communist raised by the same. Communism demands rejecting God and destruction of his church and saints. It's literally satanic. But some Christians fail to remember that Satan transforms himself into an angel of light.
Yeah, remember, many pieces of art actually depict Lucifer as a beautiful being, more so than they do as the usual devil.
Yes. That's what thank you for the super chat, Skillet. That's what that Paul turned Paula guy was making me think of, is bathed in like an angel light, like bathed in goodness. Even the way he speaks and tries to look like this grandmotherly figure, and it makes me think of Jeffrey Marsh, but also in Little Red Riding Hood, like the wolf who got in the grandma's clothing, you know, and hid in the bed like grandma. That's really, you know, there was one point where his eyes flashed all creepy like, but he's got this reassuring tone and smile, and I care about the children. You're right, it's Jeffrey Marsh.
Yeah, who just got an invite to the DNC to speak.
Wow.
Yikes.
Yeah, Jeffrey Marsh will be on stage at the DNC.
Hold on, the guy who spoke with the first clip?
No.
Jeffrey Marsh is a TikToker that likes to tell kids that I'll be your family. You don't have to listen to your parents. If you're part of the community, then you just come to me and get in my Patreon.
Yes.
Oh, gosh.
He encourages kids to cut off contact with their parents if they are so-called phobes, right? Or they don't go along with your gender identity.
And I think he identifies as non-binary because he's usually in women's makeup with a 5 o'clock shadow and does his hair women's style, short women's style. So
he's really creepy.
He's creepy.
Yeah. And he does, wait, do we have time for me to show you a funny little clip of him so you know who we're talking about or not? Is that too
Yeah,
often?
go for it.
Okay.
Actually, I said he's very creepy. I was thinking about the guy from the first guy, but yeah, let's see.
That guy's also creepy.
They're essentially the same person.
Okay.
So my friend Mike Harlow does impressions of him side by side to accentuate the creepiness.
Yeah.
In case you have trouble seeing it. And so this is one of them. That's Jeffrey Marsh on the right, and this is my friend Mikey on the left, imitating him. So,
hey kids, so parents watch the video and then come back and watch with your kids and your stuffed animal. This, Mr. Bunny. Mr. Bunny is our distinguished guest and has been my friend, my good friend, for years, because grown-ups like, the grown-ups who are doing it right, like joy. We play with dolls. We have action figures. We have stuffed animals. Because adults need comfort too, kids. And if anybody ever wants you to grow up out of liking the things you like, or, you know, you're going to get mature and that means not having fun or joy, that's not a nice person. So
I'll stop the last part. He really drives it home. He makes it over the top. It's like, look, if you don't see the creepiness, I'm going to accentuate it for you.
Man, I would be like, step away from the television or iPad. Give it to me. Step away. Wow, that's that. I think that goes beyond creepy. There's something evil about it.
It's like,
oh yeah,
and he's speaking at the DNC.
Yeah.
Well, he's been invited. I don't know that I've seen that he accepted, but he has been invited to be a speaker.
That's not.
I don't want to get too ahead of myself on that one, I guess.
They probably have him booked to entertain the kids in the daycare room while everyone's at the. Like, hello, kids.
Sunday school with Jeffrey Marsh.
Alone. Yes. Daycare supervisor. Oh, that's his whole shtick, by the way, Michelle. He always talks directly to kids. And he's always saying, children, this and your parents don't understand. And like that kind of like real culty groomery kind of let me separate you from your parents who love you kind of vibe.
Well, and it has a Patreon that he invites minors to come join his Patreon. Where
do we know
you
what goes
can
on the
say a whole
Patreon?
bunch in DMs in Patreon.
Yeah, has anyone investigated that Patreon? I feel like someone should.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know it gets brought up quite often. Every time one of his videos goes viral on TikTok. He kind of laid low for a little while after the last video that he had made with Dylan Mulvaney.
Oh.
So,
yeah.
Don't see him as often anymore, but every time it's creepy.
Super Base, just a couple more people I want to thank. Super Base for $2. Thank you so much. Says the F in communism stands for food. Oh, I get it because it's not there.
It's not there.
That took me a second. There you go. John Thomas, thank you for the $10 super chat. Says I saw a pastor post on Instagram talking about the Queen James Bible. He was not a fan, fortunately. It has a rainbow cross, a rainbow, by the way, that has only 6 colors instead of 7, and that is intentional. The Queen James Bible. Also, John Thomas for $10 says, for the same reason that liberation theology is rampant in the Catholic Church in South America, it is no different from Joel Osteen. LCMS ran this out in the 1970s at the St. Louis Concordia Seminary. What's LCMS?
I'm
not sure. Michelle?
I'm not sure what LCMS is. I don't really watch Joel Osteen, but I know of him enough to say that I don't really think he preaches liberation theology. He more preaches
prosperity.
Like, the prosperity gospel. Yes, like name it, claim it, have positive like belief for it, you'll have it. It's kind of more that route. Where liberation theology is really like kind of this Marxism, blacks overtaking the white Christian type thought.
LCMS is Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
Okay.
I'm not sure. That's what Russ says in the chat.
And just in case what you meant, John Thomas, was that it's equally unbiblical.
Okay. Yeah, he might.
I don't know if that's what you meant, but I tend to agree with that. I think the woke gospel is just as unbiblical as the prosperity gospel. Like they're both like different,
If you have to put a name in front of gospel, it's probably an issue.
Yeah, something's off.
They qualify everything. It's not justice, it's social justice, right?
Yeah.
It's not kindness, it's radical kindness.
Can you guys hear me okay? Just quick question.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I just switched over to a completely different device. My phone was so hot I could barely touch it. But all I will say is, yeah, totally different gospels, prosperity versus liberation, sort of woke stuff. It's different, but it's always based on feels. So it's all feels. And it's often targeted at people who are traumatized, hurt, feeling disassociated from the church, maybe had church hurt or spiritual abuse. That's how I got into the New Age. And honestly, the New Age and prosperity gospel aren't that different. And the New Age and the left sort of world aren't that different either. It's always just preying on people's good heart, unfortunately.
The wrong kind of praying.
Kind of bringing it back to the whole evangelicals for Kamala. That's exactly. I don't know if you guys have noticed how much they're saying joy and happiness and hopefulness over the past 3 weeks. That's how they're trying to repaint her as a joyful person. She's just joyous all the time. What's that?
Is that what that cackle is? Is that joy?
Yeah, that's what they're trying to brand it as. You just don't like people to have joy. I mean, that's the kind of crap that they use to try to repaint people, and that's also like what we were saying with Trump. You see how they paint him. They had to paint her not as some weirdo, but as somebody who's just joyful. Everything will be great under her.
I find that so repulsive because it's the opposite. It's an inversion. It's not joy, and it's polluting. It's polluting a beautiful word and something beautiful that God gave us.
Yeah.
And I find that really offensive. To your point, here's a headline: Kamala Harris brings back joy. Donald Trump talks of bad things.
Yeah.
Oh my
And this
God.
is one of those things where like the AP runs with it and everything will have joy. Joy, joy, joy.
Oh, it's so gross.
Which is funny because I saw somebody else said this, but it's funny because the two most unjoyful people I can think of on the planet are Joy Behar and Joy what's
Reid?
her name? Joy Reid. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a pretty funny joke. Okay, John Thomas, thank you again for the super chat for $10. He says the Canadian government deliberately spread the First Nations mass grave libel against the Catholic Church. Many churches were burned over this.
Yep.
Yeah,
And-
this is horrible.
What was that
And-
about, Kelly?
So I'll try to make this brief, but the Canadian, there's a lot of stuff in Canadian history that's different than the States. I know it's the woke stuff always melds together, and we always sort of copy you guys when it comes to our movements. We have a bad history of something called residential schools where the settlers came over, and it was the government, mostly elitists in the government, not your average farmer and settler just trying to survive minus 40 Celsius in the winter. But they created these residential schools, and there's varying reports, and some of them weren't great, and there were some abuses, and it wasn't always a perfect. A lot of them were involved with the church. It wasn't always so great. It wasn't a great representation of Christ in many cases because humans are flawed and people do bad things in the name of religion all the time. So these things happened, and there's this generational trauma. And so there's always this discussion here, and it's similar to the discussion you have there about trauma from and generational trauma from slavery, right? So for us, it's kind of the same idea, but the government likes to foment as much racial division as possible. And over the last, I don't know when this happened, the last few years, there was some kind of, I want to say LiDAR footage. I might be wrong. Some scientists can correct me in the chat. That was showing abnormalities in these various areas that were cemeteries. And they immediately, the media, the politicians just jumped into it saying that these were all graves of mass murdered children. And then you started seeing people's Facebook profiles change to, remembering that this many dead and found in this graveyard. And it was horrible sounding, but there was never any follow-up. And in fact, some of the independent journalists have found out that a lot of these were just abnormalities. They had nothing to do with mass graves, or they're graves that everybody in the community knew about. They just didn't have markings because it was from a time where the wood would have rotted away. And there's just been no accountability. There's been no research. And if you even question it for a second, you're just considered a denier and you're considered a racist. And so when this all happened, because of the way the media and politicians pushed it forward, the anger against the church, and it didn't matter what church, but specifically Catholic and Anglican, was widespread. And I think we had 65 church burnings or something over the course of a year, and
Sounds
nobody
about right.
cares, and nobody's looking into it, and it's always considered to be basically justified, and they're still happening. And again, it's just on the sides. Nobody really cares. Because they think it's justified. And again, this ties into exactly what we're talking about, which is colonialism and decolonizing the church and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a pretty horrible thing. There's actually been a couple of books written about it that have been banned from different places. That
Wow.
I'm trying to read more about it because you can't get the real answers from the media because they tell the sensationalized story. And then when someone says, actually, wait a minute, we talked to this chief of this reserve and he said, no, that's not the case. And they print a little thing at the bottom and they move on. So it's fomenting a lot of racial division, and it's actually prompted UN involvement to say that there's been a genocide. And yeah, it's really bad. It's really, really bad.
And the whole government, the media, everything, the whole machine was running with it like it was true.
Oh yeah. 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 Except for the odd independent journalist, and everyone gets canceled. There's been teachers that have been canceled and just fired because they just dared to discuss this in a more, I don't know, compassionate but critical thinking way. So probably everything I've said could just get me put onto a watch list, I'm sure. So yeah, it's really, and it's sad because nobody wins, right? The First Nations, who did have a history of this, don't win. The country loses. Everybody just is mad at each other, and Christianity takes the hit, and churches get burnt down, including churches that are on First Nations land, which means that First Nations who have spent their years there getting married, grieving, going to to worship together, going to grieve the loss of a loved one. They lost their church too, but nobody seems to care about that.
The left doesn't care.
No,
That whole
no.
expression, the liberals get the bullet too, that communist expression. It's like that. It's like, well, the First Nation churches get the fire too.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. Yeah, nobody wins. It's just anger and lashing out. And that's, again, that goes back into what all of you have been saying about this anger behind these sorts of videos that we're watching. It's not of God. It's just anger and resentment and revenge. And it's not Christ-like at all. So.
And that's something I want to say really quick too on what they're saying of how, again, how wrong it is. And I would even say morally wrong that it is for people that have the power to print stuff or to get on the news. And if they get on and spread rumors, think of what the gospel talks about, gossip.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are spreading gossip, rumors, lies, slander, things that you've not checked out, you've not tried to understand to stir up hate, God really looks down upon that, because that's wicked. That's evil to do. If you're doing it with intention, knowing you are lying, slandering, didn't check this info, and then going with it.
Absolutely. And it becomes one of those sort of, crying wolf. If you do it over and over again, you lose accountability and nobody believes in the institution anymore. And then when something bad does happen to a group of people, and we do need to step in for people who are the victims of an injustice, nobody believes them anymore. And now those victims don't end up ahead anyway. It's just a lose-lose. It's just it's not very humane. It's really quite sick from it, whether it's from secular or a Christian view. It's just disgusting.
Well,
Yeah.
and the lack of accountability for things like that is the really disgusting part, because it's just like, who's getting held accountable? Nobody. We just said, oops.
Yeah. Oh, did we foment a whole race war over the last 2 years? Oops.
Yeah.
Just horrible. Yeah.
A lot of the same's going on in Europe right now.
Yes.
France has had so many churches burning. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I've got a mainstream news article. Well, the left won't think it's mainstream.
Before you start, I want to piggyback. So what would the left say if right now all kinds of mosques were burning in America? What would they say?
Islamophobia.
Yep. But if it's done in France to churches or in Canada to churches, no one says anything. And that is where Christians need to be like, hey, like, this has got to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's partiality. Yeah, they'll keep their mouth shut.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is a Fox News article about what we were talking about earlier. And this is a different host for one of the, this is not the host we were talking about earlier who did the evangelicals for Kamala call. This is a second one. This is an activist, Ikamini Uwan, who led one of these calls, Evangelicals for Harris. The headline is Evangelicals for Harris host has said, quote, whiteness is wicked.
Wow.
And that police need to be, quote, destroyed and rebuilt. Activist Ikamini Uwan argued that whiteness is, quote, rooted in violence. Whiteness is rooted in theft. It's rooted in plunder. It's rooted in power. It's rooted in privilege.
As he's urging people to vote for the former district attorney in California that actually kept people in past their probation or parole dates so that she could use them as labor.
Right. It doesn't have to make logical sense to them.
No.
As long as they can pile on and demonize what they call whiteness, which means white people,
mm-hmm.
And which is just a vehicle for Marxism, which is they just use they use race, they use sex, they use all these identity groups as vehicles for Marxism, for communism. But yeah, Wednesday's upcoming Evangelicals for Harris event will be hosted by an activist who has a long history of bashing whiteness and calling for the destruction of police departments. The Evangelicals for Harris group announced on Saturday that activist Ikamini Uwan will be hosting their Zoom call this week, one of many identity-based online Zoom meetings in support of the new Democratic Party nominee. And you can see here, they're all excited. Ikamini Uwan. Uwan has described herself on her website as a, quote, reparations activist whose work spans the globe, and she has advocated for global reparations on behalf of Africans and African descendants on the floor of the United Nations 3 times. So there's the word activist again.
Does she ever refer to herself as a minister, or is she just an activist that happens to be an evangelical Christian?
I'm going to check out her Twitter.
I don't
Because
know,
they
but
just use the word activist.
I'm noticing the theme of both of the hosts are women.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you knew they're going to do that. They're going to maximize what they can do there.
Uh-huh.
A woman of color, then we can just maximize the oppression across the board.
Yeah. So she describes herself as M Diva, NAACP Image Award nominated author, Sister Theology. She's one half of a show called Truth's Table. She is a public theologian, a Pan-Africanist, a part-time fashionista, an old school hip hop head, unbought, unbossed, unbothered.
Uneducated.
Yeah, I love the public theologian. Like, that's fine. Like, we should all as Christians be a theologian, a studier of God. But like, I love how that's worded there.
Public theologian. Okay. So she's hosting. She is a reparations activist. Evangelicals for Harris, which was formerly Evangelicals for Biden. Oh, they just rebranded. Is a
name change.
It's a project of Faith Voters, a 501c organization, a nonprofit. And with the Zoom event fast approaching, past statements about her race and from her about race and policy have gone viral. Quote, she says, "We have to understand something. Whiteness is wicked. It is wicked. Whiteness. It's rooted in violence. It's rooted in theft. It's rooted in plunder. It's rooted in power. It's rooted in privilege," Uwan said at an evangelical Christian racial reconciliation conference in 2019. She's also made numerous statements about law enforcement, such as calling to defund and even abolish the police as an institution. Quote, "I would like to see at least 80% of the budget taken out and used for different services. That's across the board around the country. Then I'd like to see the police departments destroyed and rebuilt in phases. It has to happen in phases. I mean, completely reimagining what it is. Reimagining what can be, unburdened by what has been." She says, "I mean, down to changing the name so it's even no longer police. Y'all are public safety guardians, okay? And you do not have access to guns so easily, willy-nilly. You can't go into a situation with your gun."
These people live in a different reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, they truly do. Like, they live in a different reality where in their world, somehow getting rid of all police makes it a better world.
Yes. I mean, and so you can't, they're not going to be able to use, okay. How do you have a public safety guardian? How are they supposed to enforce law? Like,
Probably about as well as England's police does.
Right.
Ooh, yeah, not so good.
And they're still allowed to have guns sometimes.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
it feels like that's a sometimes situation.
Yeah.
That's a sometimes situation.
Just not when, hundreds of thousands of people are marching down the streets.
just when they're coming to arrest you for a tweet.
Yeah. That's when it's
And then they
important.
get a gun for sure. When they're going for JK.
We're coming for your harmful speech. We got a question here. And by the way, I should have said at the beginning, I usually say, and I forgot, everybody's welcome in our chats. This is just, we're a group of Christians from a variety of backgrounds who come together and try and give our perspective on things. And believers and non-believers are welcome in the chat. There's no dumb questions. We just ask you trying to be civil with one another. And here's a question. So Rich's girl asks, so in this election then, so we're supposed to just vote for the lesser of two evils?
I think that's always the case.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. What are the options? What else do you do? I don't even know the answer to that.
What do you think about, so when I left the woke left, Kelly, I went through a period for a time, because it's a slow progression out of a cult.
Yeah.
And when I first left, I was reading all these different historical quotes and stuff about how if you do not vote for the person who you think is the best candidate, that you're basically throwing your vote away, that it's not wasted if you're voting for the person you genuinely believe is the best candidate, even if they don't have a shot, like a third party, for example. And I was of that mindset for a year or so of like, it doesn't matter. I should vote based on principle, and I should always vote for the person who I think is the best, not the lesser of two evils, but the best, right? I'm not really in that frame of mind anymore. I'm more now in the frame of mind of things that the house is on fire and I've got to vote for the person I think has a shot at defeating the side that I think is most evil. And so for me, that eliminates voting for third parties now. It's kind of the exact opposite of where I was when I first came out of woke. Did you have a trajectory like that? Like, what do you guys think about the idea that it's always best to vote based on principle and for the best option? Like, if you, for example, there are some people in the chat who support and are going to vote for RFK. Do you think that that's a very principled stance?
I think it's more of a protest vote. And I think if you're doing a protest vote, most of the time you're just saying, I don't want to be held responsible for what's coming for the next 4 years or 2 years, depending on, where you're voting at what level, that kind of thing. I don't really believe in the abstaining of voting. We all have a duty to participate, in my mind. And if you choose to participate by doing a protest vote or throwing away the vote, sure, whatever. But I don't think that's very patriotic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, I think when I first came on your show, Keri, I was either just going to be running for politics or I had just run for politics. So I actually ran for a populist party that was brand new in Canada. It was called it's still there. It's called the People's Party of Canada, the PPC. And I was all in. I was going to vote for what I believed in. I loved every policy. I appreciated the leader at the time, and I wanted to give people a choice. And I knew I wasn't going to win, but I wanted to be a part of that forward momentum because I wanted to stand for my conviction and not be milquetoast, essentially. But, after that first election, we did okay. And then just there was issues, and over time, that's a whole different story. But over time, it's very obvious that party's not going to win. And now we are, as you said, Keri, the house is on fire. Things are bad. We're going to, as my friend Frank says, we're going to hit an iceberg. We got to change course one way or the other. And maybe we can't completely do a U-turn, but we got to get away from that iceberg. And I'm more in reality now where I hate that I have to compromise on stuff to, hold my nose and vote for one of the basically two big parties. We have a few parties here, but there's really only two that are up for actually winning. Realistically, one of them's going to win. And if I vote for a different one, it's just one vote pulled away. And so I don't fault anyone for doing that. I believe in voting for who you believe in. Now, in Canada, it's a bit different because the person is voting for their member of parliament in their region. So there's 338 ridings. And I believe that we should be voting for the person who's best to represent your area. We've gotten away from that into just the party system. But even aside from that, it does come down to, realistically, if this goes sideways and we get more Trudeau, we get more liberal, essentially coalitions with the NDP, which is straight up socialist, we are in trouble. And so I'm like you, Keri. I've kind of gotten away from that. In an ideal world, I would love for these parties to win, but it's not happening. And maybe it will one day, but it's not. So yeah, I'm kind of with you where you just have to do what you have to do. And you try to vote for the lesser of two evils and pray for their salvation. Really, right?
And
because if they find Jesus, things will go better, obviously.
I was just thinking, Keri, if I could ask a question, if I had Trump and Kamala up on stage, I think I would ask them this. If you were president, would you be willing to pardon, I forget her name, it's a Black woman who was sentenced to prison, I believe for 10 years for praying in front of an abortion clinic.
Oh.
Right.
And I want to see who answers yes and who answers no.
Yes.
Because one side of that, one party, their constituents would be really ticked off if she said, yes, I would consider that. And I just feel that tells you what you need to know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The other side would applaud loudly for that person getting out of prison for praying in a public place.
And we kind of saw one side make a decision like that in the last 2 weeks, because no way could we nominate Josh Shapiro as the far more qualified VP, because he's Jewish, and that would piss off most of my party.
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Oh yeah, that was the
That
reason.
was why. 'Cause
Yeah,
it-
that's why he's not the nominee, because they have to have Pennsylvania to win. He's the governor in Pennsylvania, and
And he has
too
that
many
over
people said you
60%.
can't do that right now.
Yeah,
Because
he has a
of all
60%
the-
approval rating there.
they got too many anti-Semites in their party.
Yep.
Even
mean-
Dan Jones called it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that question, in a way, kind of has been shown what
Yeah.
the answer was.
Yeah. Kelly, when you ran for office, were you the lesser evil or the greater evil?
That really depends who you ask, Keri. I was the ultimate evil to some people, you know, literally Hitler and all that jazz. In my opinion, we had, and I still like the policies, it was a very principled, common sense conservative party that was willing to take on issues and have a little bit of kahunas, really, right? And there's a lot of Christians that were standing for it. So I still think that parties like that are great, but I don't know. It's not quite the same here, but when I look at what's happening in the States, for example, even just on the pro-life issue alone, I've seen this kind of argument between, was it abolitionists and pro-lifers? And
Mhm.
abolitionists will say, well, pro-lifers are just, you know, you're just compromising. But the difference is, do you want to save some babies' lives, or you know, go on the opportunity that you're not going to actually win this argument and save everyone's lives, because that's not going to happen. So it's better to save some babies' lives. It's better to find someone who's more pro-life and to try to just little bit by bit change people's minds. Like it's really unfortunate politically, because you always have to compromise, because at the end of the day, it is a human that you're voting for. It is humans that are creating legislation. It's not Jesus. It's not the God that we serve. It's humans. And so there's always going to be a compromise. You're never going to find the perfect person. And I'm not trying to be a downer and say don't have hope and
No.
support new parties or whatever, but it's just finding that balance between realism and idealism is tricky. And yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. It's a tricky one. But yeah, whether I was good or evil, like just
I know.
go ask the mainstream media and you'll find out.
Yeah, I'm sure they said you were evil. I can only imagine.
I heard it all. Yeah.
Former woke cultists turned Christian. They hate it. They're like,
Yeah,
get
worse.
away.
The
Worse
worst.
than a detransitioner.
Yeah. We got to come up with a good word for that. De-woke something. I don't know.
Sure. Think on it.
Brett, happy birthday to Brett's mom, by the way.
Mhm.
Brett Emons is here. He's been a member for 3 months. He says, hey, everyone. I hope everyone had a great day.
Hello, Brett.
We hope you had a great birthday celebration.
Keri, was that a joke that you tried to make about we need to come up with a new word for that?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
it wasn't a joke. I would like to come up with a word.
Your
like-
show is literally called Deprogrammed.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, well, it's deprogramming woke, but you talk about the detransitioners. It's like
Right.
the
Okay.
wokesters, maybe, or the what do I call them? The wokies, de-wokies. Doesn't have the same ring. To
I'm
it.
I
just
thought
looking
I
at
thought you were
it.
making a very sly joke in there.
No, it's just when you say former SJW or former woke person, it's kind of clunky and long. Like there's not a word like
Right.
but
Yeah.
it's very accurate. It's very specific about what belief system you used to be in. Okay. Do you guys have anything else you think we should cover, or should we wrap it up? I know a couple people have to go.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get going here in just a second.
Well, I know there's so much more we could talk about evangelicals, about Trump, about Kamala, and maybe we can touch into this on some future episodes as well, because this is going to be a long and painful election season. So we could probably pick it back up again. But I wanted to thank our guest, Kelly, for being here all the way from Canada.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Since I'm not officially American, I thought, do I have anything to add to this delightful conversation? But no,
Yes.
very good to chat with all of you. So thank you for your insights.
Can you
Good to
just
have you.
It was nice to meet you.
nice to
Yourself.
meet you. I mean, I've already met you. Nice to
Yeah,
see
sure.
you. Can you tell people where to find you if they are not familiar with you?
Sure. So I just recently joined the weird world of Twitter, or now X. Yeah, that's how old-fashioned I am. I was still on Twitter. So it would be, oh, you've got it there. Yeah.
There.
I think it's at KellyLamb86 on X. And then I am on YouTube. I'm just slowly getting back in after some health struggles to make some content, a little bit of music, a little bit of discussing my testimony out of the new age, a couple of interviews like this. But yeah, as I move into a new home and heal up, I will hopefully be making more content. So.
There she is, guys. Go and give her a follow. Thank you for being here. And
Yeah, thank you again.
and Michelle, where can people find you? What are you up to?
You can find us. We just put me and my sister at Force Flight Entertainment on YouTube. We just put out our first time watching reaction of Crocodile Dundee. And then also you can subscribe to my Christian podcast, Force of Light Podcast. And you can follow me on Twitter at Force of Light Entertainment.
I'm
Didn't you
trying
guys set up a Patreon
Yes, we do. We have a
for
Patreon where you
like
can
actual watch-alongs?
yes, and where they can get the full reaction unedited.
And there's the links. Thank you, Robert. Thanks
Yes,
for
thank you,
grabbing
Robert.
these.
Andy.
CJ says, I haven't seen your Dundee reaction yet. I'll get to it.
It's fun.
And there's your X account if people want to go and find you. And Brahma Bull, what do you have going on? I know you don't do you said you don't do the Wednesday night show anymore, or you
Yeah.
guys canceled it.
Yeah, both of the Wednesday night shows that I was doing after this one are now done. So I get Wednesday nights off now. But tomorrow night on Comics Division, Thursday night Throwdown. Friday with Little Chad and Slender Dad on Ascent and Art, where we talk some pop culture and stuff. And then Sunday mornings, I've got the new show, The Bullpen, on my channel at 10:30 Mountain Time, where we solely talk about politics. So we're going over lots of the election and stuff. So come check that one out if you like discussions somewhat like this. Yeah, John, no smoking jacket tonight. It's too hot. Once we hit fall and the temperature goes back down, I'm there. But
Here's the YouTube link for Brahma Bull's channel. You guys go and give it a follow. That's where he hosts The Bullpen, which is the political show he's talking about. It's a lot of fun. I got to be on the first episode, and I want to come and hang out with you guys again. That was so much fun.
anytime you want to. Yeah, I've just got to wake up on time. I overslept my own show last Sunday.
People started dissing on me for being late. I'm kidding. They gave me super chat for being late, and then I was like, "That's a disincentive, actually. Don't do that." There's my link tree. Thank you, Robert. Thanks for throwing it in there. Had a really great time with you guys. We'll see you in a couple weeks. We do these. If you guys were here for the first time, we do these every 2 weeks on Wednesdays at 6:00 Central. And if you have suggestions for topics or things you want us to cover or for guests, just drop them in the comments. We appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next time.
Night, everybody.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.